This is a sync call to talk through use cases that we have pulled out of the issue for AfterScript not running after pipeline timeouts or cancellation. So Elliot, Caroline, Darren, and I have been meeting and discussing this issue for a while. And we thought that a good almost reset would be, hey, let's talk about the actual problems that customers are having, as opposed to starting with the solution. So I pulled out, I reviewed the issue and looked through all of the comments that contained a use case or problem or some summary of what a customer was running into, and really pulled out two big themes of this. The first is that resources get started by the pipeline and they're left running when the pipeline is canceled or times out, I guess the right word. And the other is that there are things that customers want to do every single time a pipeline runs, whether it is successful, is canceled, or times out. And with the bug that we're having today, neither of those things can happen. So there's some comments in there. If there's a disagreement or additional context that I can provide from those, it'd be great. But what I wanted to do in this first chunk of time of the meeting is make sure that for the developers on the call, is this problem easy to understand? And do we have consensus and commitment that these are the things we should go solve?
I guess the request is easy to understand. What it'll take to implement that is, I have no idea at the moment.
That's fair. I think we've been down the we don't know how to fix it path quite a few times. So that's why we wanted to surface back up and say, instead of trying to fix the thing as described, are there alternatives to solving the problems here? And maybe that's what we end up with is here's an alternative way to solve for these problems and these themes of resources start and I can't stop them. So they run forever. So I have to do manually, or hey, a pipeline is running. I always want to go do a thing. I can't do that today, whatever that thing might be. Is there a different way to solve for that problem or get to that outcome for a customer?
Is the difficulty in solving the problem that we can't solve the whole problem in one solution? And so maybe we need to just like solve pieces of the problem and make it a smaller problem?
That's a bit of a segue into the second bit that I wanted to get to, of constraints on the solution that maybe we can implement and talk about biting off a smaller chunk. But I want to make sure that are we committed to solving these problems, or do we only want to solve for one of these and say this is the thing we want to attack first? It looks like there were more comments about resources starting than I always want to do a thing. Always doing a thing could be making sure that I shut down all of the environments and clean up all the things in my Kubernetes cluster, whatever it might be. But is there one of these that we should focus on instead as the core of the problem, and that might help us, with the solution space?
And just to be clear on that same train of thought, this is on job cancellation only, right?
Pipeline is my understanding.
Sorry, pipe. All right. Well, I'm too far removed to understand the implications if there's a big difference there. But
I think timeout is the bigger case there, though, Elliot. Of I started a pipeline, it spun up stuff to run tests, it eventually timed out, and
well, and that
they're still running.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where like as soon as then it starts to become this kind of catch-all. No matter what's the cause, it should always run kind of scenario.
And can we niche down from that?
Yeah, I think we need to constrain down from there. Like cancellation, okay, like there's only so many triggers for a cancellation. Timeout for whatever, or for example, is a different thing. Or job failure is a different thing. Or timeout's a huge problem because part of the timeout might be because of some kind of networking issue and like we've lost contact with where the jobs are running. So how do we actually go to try and clean up the thing when we can't even talk to it, right? Like that's a huge balloon, like umbrella of a problem that like I don't even know if it's solvable at all. And so if we can avoid that, I think cancellation is like a user-defined action. Like that action's come from a user. We know it's happened. Presumably, we're still in contact with things. Nothing's timed out or whatever. And so I think that's a much more reasonable thing to focus on.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Thanks for saying that in more words.
So I think there's an assumption there that the thing that we need to go cancel is a runner. What if it's just some other thing in my Kubernetes cluster though? Like I've got test hardware I've got to go set up, and I start that in my job. I set up an environment. I'm still connected to that, but the job that's running on the runner timed out.
Yeah, that there are other bugs basically the same as that. And even if the it can even happen if the job runs successfully and completes successfully. Some of the processes and resources that are started don't receive the whatever sig kill or sig up or whatever, and so they keep running.
So maybe we constrain this on, hey, you still have connectivity to the things you want to stop. If that connection is timed out, we can't solve for that problem. But if the job is timed out, we can, anything that you've already started and still have connectivity to, we can try to send a cancel or send a shutdown to that, or run the script that would do that for yourself. Does that better constrain us? Or do we need to say, hey, really, it's just, we can handle this on cancellation. We can't handle this when a job or a pipeline times out today.
I think ensuring the after script runs and then, like properly shutting down any services or whatever we started, I think they're two separate problems. And maybe one can be addressed by the other. Maybe making sure that the after script runs is a way to, like, it's kind of a roundabout way to make sure the other one happens. Or you could implement shutting down your services in your after script if it was guaranteed to run. But I think they're two separate problems.
Yeah,
solutions
and
can be very different.
so the use case of wanting to run the after script, I think, was that I use the after script to go shut down whatever is happening in my Kubernetes cluster, and they might have a big hammer that does that. Or it might just be go shut. It might send a Slack message even of like, hey, the Kubernetes cluster is still, or it has nodes are still running. Somebody should go look at that thing. Like that might be
ideally
the body
runner
of
would
it.
handle that, but the after script is like a fallback.
Yeah, I think that's a good constraint of, we just want to make sure after script runs. That's where we stop. We can't confirm that you can shut down resources that you start up. That might be a use case for you, but really the body of your script, that's on you. Okay, so if we further, so let's kind of pivot into further constraints on the solution set. Elliot, you had talked about timeouts. We've been discussing that for a bit. Do we think we can solve for that use case of runner is timed out, pipeline gets into a state where we've hit that threshold for pipeline timeout or job timeout, and then an after script should run? Do we think that we can solve for that, or is that timeout fuzziness still too hard?
I mean, in my mind, part of the problem is that there are many places where timeouts can happen.
Yeah.
Like places that come to mind because it's recent is like the pipeline itself could time out, or there's a timeout when you run a Go test. There's a default timeout of I think 10 minutes. The timeout could happen there, and I think the pipeline would see that as the job having failed. Yeah, and then like Elliot said, there could be like network timeouts. Yeah.
Well, I swear, and I think maybe we're kind of getting. This is something we need to tease apart. It's like, are we trying to use this as a rescue for when our system or infrastructure is failing, or are we trying to just do some ensured cleanup on a user-defined action? Whatever it is, tearing down some infrastructure or releasing a resource. And I think in that second case, let's say releasing a resource, it's like a planned thing. Like it's a thing we know we have to do, and we have to clean it up. Trying to rescue when something has clearly gone wrong, potentially on our side, is just a huge can of worms that I don't think this is the right solution for it.
So maybe the constraints could be we only care about when the user cancels a job or a pipeline, sorry, and when the pipeline itself times out. We don't care about any of the timeouts, and then we just want to make sure that the after script runs in those two cases.
Yeah.
Could we have a webhook potentially that that happens whenever a job finishes? So it just, then they're responsible for creating a cleanup that happens based on us sending them, oh, this thing was canceled. This thing was successful.
Can I repeat that back just to make sure can I restate that to make sure I understand what you're asking? So instead of executing a script, we fire off a webhook to wherever they want, and then they have to implement something and intercepts it and then deals with the fact that it occurred.
Yeah.
That would give them the option to run a different pipeline on cancel, which is one of the things that some of the use cases wanted. Yeah. So I'm also wondering, to build on that, is can we build two solutions? Like to handle the different use cases, right? We want to run after script because it seems like it should run on cancel, but also have a webhook so that we can, for the people that want to do the thing that this doesn't handle, that they can do other things. Or is that, are we trying to solve too much with one thing?
Yeah, I think we can absolutely build multiple solutions. And if this problem is too big to solve with one, let's tear it apart and make it multiple problems.
I like both of those ideas, both the two solutions and the webhook notion.
So we have a job webhook today that says job events when job state changes.
So I think what we don't have is a way, like a really slick built-in way to consume our own webhook, right? Like you can't point the webhook back at GitLab and say when you get a webhook. So I think you can't do this. Feel free to correct me. So can you do it where it's, hey, if I get a webhook that says a job in this project is in this state, then execute this script?
No, you have to, you can send it back to a pipeline or to the pipeline, but it will just run the pipeline. So you have to then configure your pipeline to make it go to the right place, which is more complicated. It would be nice if the webhooks were more granular, you could fire in specific conditions.
Yeah. You might be able to trigger a child pipeline or a different project pipeline based on job status change that then ran a script without having to consume a webhook.
If you can do it, it's not user friendly right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe we could create some documentation or a template of a way to do that.
Yeah, it might be an MVC of sorts of use our job webhook, look for the state, go do the thing you want to do to ensure that cleanup happens. All right, so if we were to break this problem apart.
To ask one more question on that point, it's not currently possible to say run just this job from the pipeline?
No.
Just the one?
You run a pipeline, and a pipeline is a collection of jobs. If I was going to do this, if I was I don't know, it needed this feature and I was aware and thinking about webhooks and I had to implement this, I would do this outside of GitLab, because I would point the webhook somewhere, because if you point it somewhere and then you run a pipeline that then has to process the webhook payload to decide if it needs to do the thing, if it needs to go do cleanup. It's going to be doing that processing all the time. And most of the time, it's not going to need to do it, right? If I'm doing only on cancellation. So for every job that changes state, then this webhook's going to go get fired off. So I would like, this is like the perfect thing for like a Lambda or something, right? Like a serverless function, to then just go like, nope, don't need to deal with it, don't need to deal with it, don't need to deal with it. And then you're a zero cost when it's not doing anything.
Yeah, it would cause a lot of problems if you try to do it directly to the pipeline.
Yeah.
In that it would also just shut off your webhook because you would like do it too many times and then you get errors back and then it would just say, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, if we started a pipeline, every time you had a job change state, you would quickly hit max pipeline and max jobs, and you'd rate limit yourself very strangely. Okay,
Does anybody know what the
so
webhooks are used for currently?
You say it again?
Does anybody know what webhooks are used for currently, or like what a common use case for webhooks is now?
I do not.
I don't. I assume customers have need for checking when job state changes and do things with that, but not familiar. And it doesn't look like the initial issue that this was created from is linked to have any use cases in it.
I wouldn't be surprised if some people are using it for cleanup currently.
So that might be an outcome here, is that we document, if you want to ensure that resources or environments started get cleaned up, you may look at the webhook and look for jobs that are supposed to do it. And if they fail, then go do it yourself. That could be a like catch-all kind of a, hey, things failed within our infrastructure. This is the way that we recommend you go clean it up. And that's an okay outcome, I think, as long as we're pointing customers at a solution. It may not be an ideal solution, but our focus is probably best on ensuring that those timeouts don't occur in underlying platform things, as opposed to, the corner case of it happened and you want to go clean things up. So that being said, if we split this apart, this issue itself, and say, hey, really what we want to focus on first is a user cancels a job or a pipeline, we ensure that AfterScript always runs. And then the other is that the pipeline times out, we ensure that AfterScript always runs. Are there blockers to those things? And what would be the next step to uncovering those and getting them unblocked?
And the only blocker in my mind is just lack of knowledge of what it would take to address it. So a spike or an investigation.
Which we've had a couple. There's a proof of concept that a runner team worked on already that Tian, I think, is reviewing right now. So maybe that'll help uncover for each of those use cases what the exact blockers are, and maybe we just move on the one that's not blocked first, regardless of the impact or reach of that solution, just to get some movement here and better understand or perceived reach and impact understanding. So yeah, I think next steps then would be split the issue, break out the cancellation into a new issue, revamp this one as a timeout focused, and have Tian, after the review of the proof of concept and reviewing the notes here, weigh in with which of those use cases that POC could solve for or is closest to solving for, and we get that issue scheduled. I think I'd like to better understand, and to circle back a little bit on constraints, talk about, should we constrain this to, hey, this is, we want to keep this focused on just the Rails code, just the workhorse code or the pipeline execution owned code, just code that runner team owns, whether it's in Rails or in Go. What other constraints as far as that could we potentially put into this to help move it along and focus the solution?
It sounds like ensuring that it runs on cancellation would actually be pipeline, no? Like that seems like it's just part of the state machine kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
I guess it would, I don't know, would it spin up a new runner at that point? I mean, yeah, the state, you'd get the state in the GitLab application though.
I think we wanted to talk to the same runner though, right?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about it is not even think about the runner, right? Like the runner's really stupid. Like all the runner knows about is like it's really just this thing trying to consume jobs. So request a job, it does the job. Request a job, it does the job. And
Yeah,
so
I more meant a new job. I guess it would have to be a
Yeah.
new job. Like if the first one is canceled, then it would just be, well, I mean, maybe it isn't a new job. That was just my first thought. Because
yeah, I get what you're saying, but like that I think the question's about like, should it be a separate job or is it some kind of weird continuation of the first job?
like, I guess in the case of like a timeout, you'd have to be a whole nother job. In a cancellation state, I guess you could do it first and then cancel.
So the documentation calls out it happens in a new shell, but it should be part of that same job. We could change that paradigm and say, hey, this gets spun up on its own runner. Anything that you need that new runner to know about, make sure is in, some sort of global variable .environment file, whatever it might be, so that you can access it. Assume nothing exists after that job is timed out or canceled, and that the script would know about it.
Although if the after script like deletes some files and some paths, that kind of assumes that it's running in the same environment. And I bet my ass there are people doing that in after scripts.
Right. Yeah, I haven't really read through TN's spike yet either, so.
Just the way it works currently, like you can have it at the job level or the pipeline level, right? Currently, it could be. Oh, you're muted, Elliot.
Sorry, keep trying to deal with my cold. No one needs to hear that. That you talking about the after script right now?
Yeah.
Job or pipeline level? I think if it's at the pipeline level, doesn't it just like basically act as a template for every job on the job?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like there's no like after the pipeline script.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It can be part of the default section, which puts it into every job or a specific job.
Okay.
So one thing, like as a weird aside, I think we should I think there's a huge opportunity to explore more power with the webhooks. Because maybe has like tipped us off a bit or gotten us thinking about that. Like if we had some kind of simple way of consuming our own webhooks or dealing with a state machine from the webhooks that was like easy for a user to interact with and didn't require launching a job or something to like process and consume it, that'd be pretty cool.
Sounds almost like the workflow work that's happening.
Yeah.
Of state changes within a job, in addition to firing webhook, also go do this thing outside of the pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay.
I-
So just backing up a little bit, what I'm hearing constraint-wise as we're getting close to time is if that runner times out and we can't connect to it, running an after script on it gets really, really hard. If a user cancels something though, we still have connection to the runner probably. So cancellation should be the first thing that we go tackle.
Cancellation should be the first thing we tackle for sure.
Okay.
And so just to help you guys understand how that works, look, when you hit cancel in the web UI, the runner doesn't know about it right away. The way the runner gets that message is every, I don't know, couple seconds or whatever it is when it sends a partial chunk of the logs from the job. If a cancellation has occurred, it gets put in the response to that job log update. And so it'll send some logs and then look at the response and it's like, oh, and in the in-between time, someone's hit cancel and I'm going to do the abort. And so it has to still be in a healthy state for that all to work. And so I think that is definitely a much easier workflow to deal with.
Okay. I would say, so let's create that as, I'll create that as a new issue or find an issue with it better called out the use case. That will be the one that we focus on first. I think secondarily, we should work on some documentation that recommends, hey, you can use the webhook to go do any sort of cleanup on test boxes or whatever that you have set up that you're trying to use after script to cancel or shut down gracefully.
The only thing is with the webhook, you might not have, I think it suffers the same issue as like spinning up a new job, that you might not have the same like environment as far as variables and such to know like what to.
Yeah, I think there's some giant caveats there of you've got to document as you go. Here's all the things that I've done so that they could be in either the webhook payload or be sitting somewhere else externally that script can grab. Because if we lose connection to the runner, we can't get that stuff out of the runner. Like that's the hard part here, right? Is that if the runner goes down or for some reason, network timeout, meteor, whatever, like assume nothing about, or assume you can get nothing off of the runner. You have to keep that state elsewhere. And that's crummy, but that's just the reality of it. Okay. All right, well, I will want to make sure then next steps, DRI due dates get sorted here. I will take splitting the issues out and work with Caroline and the pipeline execution team to schedule the review of the POC and looking at the canceled state use case and getting that sorted. And then update the proposal for the existing issue focused on timeout and what some of the blockers are, some of the things that we've thought about, and figure out what next steps might be in creating documentation or whatever towards a user-focused resolution to that. And then I'll add to, third thing I'll do is add to some of the workflow use cases that we have, that consumption of the webhook, to try to solve for this problem as well. At least make it simpler to do the thing. Are there any other next steps that I missed as we're down to 30 seconds of this meeting left? This is really helpful.
The big ones.
I think this is really helpful in teasing apart the two problems and for me better understanding why timeout is so hard of losing connection to the runner and having to execute something on the thing you can't connect to. That makes a ton more sense to me now. I think I missed that before. All right, cool. Well, I'll write those down in the notes and execute on those next steps. And I'll upload this to Unfiltered, probably as a private video just for now. But if folks think that it should be public, great. And we'll make it such. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.